Good morning. I hope you had a good weekend. It's Monday morning and the beginning of a new week and the beginning of a new adventure for Ruth and Naomi. We are in Ruth, the book of Ruth, chapter 2, and the first two verses. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favour." So they've arrived in Bethlehem, and I think it sounds from reading this book as if there were a number of people who were related, some more distantly and some more closely, to Elimelech, the late husband of Naomi. And according to the custom, she could go to one or other of these relatives, these male relatives of kinsmen of her husband, and ask for provision, ask to become part of their household. And we do see from the end of the book that there was one kinsman who was more closely related and had the right of kinship to Naomi. It may be that they decided between them that if they could catch Boaz's eye, they would have a better situation for the future. And perhaps that's why Ruth chose to go to Boaz's field. I don't know. But she says, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I will find favour." Now, this was common practice back in those days. We are fortunate, and we have all lived all our lives in a situation where when we can't work, when we're too old to work or we can't work, we have a pension or an allowance or benefits to help us. But in the days of the Bible, such a thing did not exist. And that is why there were so many people on the streets when Jesus was around begging those who could not work because they were disabled in some way or blind or unable to raise their own funds. They were in the streets begging. And there was no welfare state. There was no national policy to support people who were poor and destitute and had no work. But in the law, there was provision for them. And I mean, you may never have read the law in the Old Testament. It's contained in the first 5 books. Some bits of it are in Deuteronomy, from Deuteronomy 20 onwards, and Exodus 20 onwards, and much of Deuteronomy is full of laws. Now, we are not bound by any of the laws. We're not part of the covenant that had to obey all these laws. But the laws that God gave do really give us great insight into his attitude towards certain situations and his idea of justice. I find them profound to look at. And it's up to us whether we take up a law or not and follow it. But the principle behind the law is so important. And it's there for our learning, just like the book of Ruth is there for our learning. So if you look at Deuteronomy 24, verse 19, this is the law that was given through Moses. "When you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterwards. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, Therefore I command you to do this. So it was the practice that the reapers would not reap right to the edge of the field. They would leave a margin of grain at the edge of the field. And those who were poor, the stranger, the visitor, the sojourner, the person who's there for a short while and going on somewhere else, the fatherless, the one without a father to provide for them, and the widow without a husband to provide for her, were allowed to go round the fields, go round the vineyards, and pick the leftover grapes that had not been harvested. When the grape harvest was ripe, they would pick all the ripe grapes, but there would always be a few grapes that weren't quite ripe, and they were not allowed to go a second time to take the rest a week later when they were ripe, because they were left in the field for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. This is a wonderful thing. It's a reminder to them, always a reminder, that you were a slave in Egypt, that there had been a time when God's people would have done anything to be able to pick up a few grains from the side of a field, or pick a few leftover grapes to satisfy their dire hunger, as a reminder. And also, I think, as a reminder that God is well able to provide for us, and that what we are given in wealth and in food is not to be hoarded. You know, Jesus told a story about a man, didn't he, who had so much grain come that he planned to pull down the existing barns and build bigger ones to store all that wonderful grain so that he could become richer. And the attitude displeased God. We should not be trusting in our own wealth. We should be generous enough with our wealth to allow others to benefit from our wealth. You know, so if this rule were applied in England, no child would ever be castigated for scrumping, for taking a few apples from a tree when you're hungry. Now, it doesn't give permission to steal. This doesn't give permission to steal. But this is the rule that was in existence when Ruth went into the fields of Boaz, and the reapers would see her going down the edge of the field, taking what she could from the field to take home to Naomi, so they'd have something to make bread from. And this was the rule. There's so much in the law. It's wonderful. One of the most stark things in the law, which is perhaps a thought for everyone, is there is not a single offence in the community that could be done that would result in someone going to prison. The law does not contain a list of prison sentences appropriate for different misdemeanours. It was recompense by payment or repayment, or it was the death penalty for certain things. But there was no imprisonment. If you couldn't pay the penalty, you sold yourself as a slave for a period of time to pay off your debt. There was no prison sentence. It's not a concept in the law of God, even though prisons existed in the lands around the nation of Israel. God did not give any prison sentences for anything. It's a great thought for the day. Anyway, I've digressed. It's enough for today for you to think on, and I'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you. Bye-bye.